that editor's article is one of those is what we're going to be talking about today.
Right.
Specifically, a piece that you wrote called "Gun Ownership is a Hedge Against Chaos." And I think there's some really interesting ideas in here. There's some stuff that I've thought about for a while now. We've described on this show a number of times how gun sales tend to increase around events where people feel that they're insecure, right?
Yeah.
That they feel that things are a bit out of control. They want to have that ability to protect themselves if need be. And this is why, for instance, in 2020, you saw such a huge increase in gun ownership. We've talked a lot about this over the last couple of years on this show. Gun sales have become a kind of chaos meter, perhaps, or at least the Americans' perception of chaos to some degree. Not all gun sales, obviously, are driven by that, but the big spikes that you've seen over the last several decades really have surrounded this. And it's kind of, as you note in this article, the thesis of this article is that it's connected to this change in gun culture that went from more prioritization of hunting to one that more prioritizes self-defense. Not that those things, of course, are it's more like a priority change rather than people weren't ever concerned about self-defense before, or that people don't care about hunting today. But can you just walk us through like what it is about this that concerns you? Because that was the main thing, is that this is actually there's concerning aspects to this.
Yeah. So, I think that people are feeling more vulnerable than they did maybe 20 years ago. I think they're less trustful of institutions, including the government and police, the institutions that have been, tasked with protecting them. I think it's hard to underestimate, and I don't think we really even fully know yet the extent to which COVID contributed, amplified some of these feelings. Certainly everybody felt vulnerable in March of 2020, and when we didn't really have a clear sense of what was going on. And then there's the sort of disorder that followed the George Floyd protests and the various cities, the sort of destruction of property, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, January 6th and the assault on the Capitol. I think all of these things helped to create a greater sense of vulnerability, a greater sense of disorder and chaos. As you said, you used the word chaos meter. So I agree. I think we're at a time when people are particularly concerned about these things. As I say in the piece, I get that. I really understand it. And not only that, but I have at times thought about buying a gun too. And I'm not a gun owner. I never have been. So I don't know if you want me to I can talk a little bit about that, but
yeah, certainly. Well, first I want to just get into that 2020 motivations just a little bit, because it's there like you said, there was March 2020, the shutdown started to happen. People, the virus was spreading. Police were short-staffed. There were prisoner releases, and there's a lot of good reasons why people might feel insecure at that moment. About how, there were food shortages, basically everything you could imagine in a worst case scenario situation.
Yes.
And so it's not surprising that drove a lot of people to want to have the option to defend themselves. Then you had the George Floyd's killing itself, which made a lot of African Americans feel insecure and increased tensions between minority communities and the police. So that leaves a lot of minorities feeling less than secure themselves, more distrustful of law enforcement, which can drive people to buy guns. Then you had the protests and eventually the riots that followed that, which made lots of other people feel that the police couldn't protect them either. That drives people to buy guns. And then, January 6th, political violence at the Capitol, something that hasn't been common in the United States since the Civil War, right?
Yes.
That drives that's another motivator for people to go out and buy guns. And, I think the gun owning perspective on this, or at the very least the gun rights movement's perspective on this is it's good that people have that option, right? That if they feel like police or the government can't protect them, that they have an option to go out and protect themselves. And so it's looked at, I think, primarily as a positive thing when gun sales go up, and more, especially when it's among new gun owners, people who hadn't owned guns before. And so that's what I want to dig into a little bit more, because obviously you can see the logic there among gun owners. Like, it's good that people have the option to defend themselves. But I want to get a little bit more into why it can also be concerning.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I definitely think people should have the option. I say that in the piece. And obviously I believe in some safeguards to make sure that guns don't fall into the hands legally, into the hands of the wrong people. But I definitely agree that law-abiding citizens have the right to arm themselves. I definitely understand why people feel vulnerable, why they might want to get a gun. And as I mentioned, I've never owned a gun in my life, but I've thought about getting one in the last couple of years for the very reasons we're discussing. But I also see a negative here. And the negative is that in a society where more and more people are owning firearms, particularly for the purpose of self-defense and not recreational shooting, which used to be the primary reason why people bought guns, for hunting, for skeet shooting, for target shooting, and things like that. And today, of course, it's flipped, and it's now largely driven by a desire to protect oneself and one's family and friends. All of that, I'm fine with that. It's just that I do think that it's a bad symptom, or a symptom, I should say, of some very bad things that are going on.